Sorry. Okay, so I've just recorded. We cleared up some energy already, so I'm going to make it so that those who watch the recording get that as well. So take a deep breath, and we're just going to plug you into the energy clearing that I did just before I recorded. So as you come in, if you can, just make sure that you have yourself muted. So in case you have any background noise, it'll be blocked out. So this law is, I'm finding, there was a post in a Facebook group just, I think, yesterday, and it opened my eyes to all of the ways that this law is being very misunderstood and misused. So what this law tells us, it's the law of projection. So what we see in other people that we have a strong emotional response to shows us something about ourselves. Now, the unfortunate thing that's been happening is people just assume that it's just straight across the board a mirroring law. And that's not what it is. There we go. So there's the phrase, you spot it, you got it, you know, that thing is bugging you, so look in the mirror. So all of these things, when said at the appropriate time and with the right words, can open up a space for you to look inward and to see what needs help. What this law tells us is there's something within us that needs attention. For instance, if you have a strong negative response to, say, somebody lied, and you have a very strong negative response to that, we ask ourselves 3 questions. The first one is, how have I lied in the past? And if that doesn't apply, then how am I lying now? And if that doesn't apply, then we look to the third question, which is, how could I do this if I was under different circumstances? Now, with lying, we all kind of lie to some degree. We might be lying to ourselves. We might be, saying little fibs here and there that maybe we share something with someone and it's not the whole truth. For instance, if we show up late to work and we say, oh yeah, the traffic was horrible, but it really wasn't horrible, we were just running a little late, that's technically a lie. But the ones that are really, really hard are the ones that this action or behavior is something that we would never do. Never, ever, ever do. That's where it gets really challenging. But before we go to those ones, I want to share the positive of this law. So if we have a strong positive response or reaction to a quality in somebody else, what this law tells us is, you spot it, you got it. So if someone is a very kind and honest and loyal person and we just love that about them, it probably means that we are either that right now, excuse me, or we have the ability to really embody that quality. So for instance, if we see that somebody has a gift for something and we don't think that we have it, we can see it and think, oh, that is so awesome. I really want that. I really, really want that. It means that you have the ability to develop that. So I have a little picture here. It is super cheesy, but it hopefully proves my point or explains this. So these are my people, and you'll see that they have different, so these are like little energies, little resonances. The squared ones are the ones that are the same. So what happens is, let's say this is us, this is me, and this other person comes along and say they have the gift of words and they speak so beautifully and they can just write, and I'm like, oh, I so want that. That is such an amazing quality. What that's doing is it's waking up this same resonance in me. It's bringing it to the surface. It's igniting something. It's awakening something. And so what happens is sometimes we don't see that and we think they have it and I don't. And where we can go wrong with this is we get in an energy of lack or scarcity or insecurity, and it can create jealousy and envy with this. But if we use this law as a guide to show us what our qualities are, we can search and list and then use that as a template to see what our gifts are. So with those questions that I posted, I wanted you to, let's see, I think it was list 5 qualities and characteristics, behaviors that you strongly admire in another person. These things should elicit a strong positive emotion. So are there any of these things that you guys want to share? And I can kind of walk you through them. And you guys can unmute if you want to participate. Okay, we'll come back to this. So that's the positive aspect of that law, and it is often completely forgotten. People don't even know that it's there. So we go back to this, and this is me, and now another person has come to me and say they're angry, like all the time. So angry, and they just don't control it, and I'm like, man, why do they do that? That, like, don't they see that it's hurting people? Don't they see that that's not okay? So if I have this like intense negative response to it, and it's not just an observation, it's not just, oh, that person's angry. It's not okay to be angry, and it's not okay for them to be angry with me, and I'm going to hold a boundary, but it's this judgment that comes with it. That strong response of, oh, why are they angry? Why do they do that? So what it's done is it's found this resonance within me, and it's waking it up. But it doesn't necessarily mean that I am angry, or that I am an angry person, or that I manifest anger. What this does, though, is it shows us a part of us that we have locked away, and we've tried to destroy it. We've taken this part of ourselves that has the potential to be angry, and we've tried to get rid of it. We've tried to hide it. We've tried to destroy it, and we have completely locked it away so that it never comes out. So we as humans, we're come from a very divine creator, and we are all from the same divine energy and creation. We are all made in the image of our Heavenly Father. So what this means is that we all have the same potential. We all have the potential for good and for evil, and we are all connected, and we're all the same. Now, that doesn't mean that this terrible person down the street, I shouldn't say that. This person who has poor behaviors down the street, does that mean that I'm just like that person and I do those things? It doesn't. What it means is I have the same potential to manifest certain behaviors. So with the anger, if I have taken that part of myself, hidden it away, locked it up so that it never comes out, I still hate that part of myself. I don't love it and I don't accept it. And we know this because this other angry person has woken up something in us. And if it does that, then it means that there is an energy that still needs healing. So what I do in my work is we find those triggers that people have, and we find, why is this bothering you? So if it's anger, okay, anger, I've judged it, it's bad, it's not okay. I will ask the person, what does it mean if you are angry? And they would probably have judgments that say, I'm an evil person, or I'm a bad person, or I'm unforgivable, or I'm unlovable. So we would find that part of them. So what happens, at some point in your life, someone who expressed anger, or someone expressed that anger was wrong or evil, we intuitively and inherently know that we have this duality. There's opposition in all things. We have the ability to manifest anything. And so we decide to take that part of ourselves that could be angry and lock it away. And we reject it. And we think that if we destroy this part of ourselves, then it will go away. But we can't do that, because we can never destroy truth. We can never destroy ourselves. We can't break parts off of ourselves. That's not wholeness. So wholeness is finding this part of ourselves, giving it everything that it needs, nourishing it, creating balance in it, and freeing it, loving it, and accepting it, and saying, you know what? I have the ability to be an angry person or to show anger, but I choose not to. And I will stop rejecting and hating this part of me. And so then we bring it back together. But we bring it back together in a very beautifully balanced way. We don't have to be afraid of it. So just this last week, I had a session with a client who we knew that we needed to work on. She rejected what we called the fat girl in her. And I personally don't like that term because it comes with a lot of negative connotation and triggers, but this is what she needed. So she had struggled with a lot of body issues. And even though she wasn't incredibly, she was not that overweight, she just wasn't happy and content. So what we had to do was find this part of her that she shunned away. So it was the part of her that had the potential to be incredibly overweight. And what we had to do was see her in her worst potential. For this particular individual, at this moment, she had to see it at its worst. And we had to work through, okay, is she lovable? We had to work the false beliefs of, if I'm fat, I'm not lovable. If I'm fat, God doesn't love me. If I'm fat, it means I don't take care of myself. And all the judgments around that and what that means. So we balanced her. And when we first found that part of her, that part wouldn't feel safe with her because she knew that she would be rejected. She knew that that person didn't want her in with her. So we worked with her, and she learned how to love that part of her and brought her back in. So what she realized is there was this constant civil war going on with her. She would eat certain ways and be very restrictive and go on these very, very restrictive diets and oftentimes extreme. But then this part of her would say, it would start screaming at her and saying, what about me? What about me? And then she would start binging on food. She'd go through these cleanses, go through these strict diets, and then all of a sudden she would binge. And I said, because that's rejecting that part of you. You have to give her what she needs, nourish her, love her, accept her, bring her into balance, and then she won't do that anymore. So these actions and behaviors, they're just shining light on where we have things that we need healed inside. So, do you guys have any questions so far? Because I'm going to move on to the next thing if you guys are understanding that. If you guys can just like give a thumbs up or a yes, and I'll move forward. So,
yeah, we're good.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
You're good. We had a lot more people sign up for this, and they're just not on, so I hope that they're getting the links.
I do have one question about it.
Yeah.
How do you differentiate between, like, you know, you see these things in other people that you don't like,
mm-hmm.
and then the things that you can't imagine ever doing?
Right.
Where do you draw the line of something that you need to work on? You know what I mean?
I do. And thank you for asking that. And that actually will lead me into my next story.
Okay, great.
So when, and I feel it in here, when you can look at it without like intense emotion towards the individual doing the inappropriate act. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're fine. I'm asking myself, I'm asking if it's appropriate to share a story.
Okay.
So I have two stories and experiences that over the last 2 years, God has shown me this law in very deep and often painful ways. So the first one, and I'm going to be as respectful as I can and not share as many details, but for those of you who know me somewhat personally, my husband and I took in 5 kids just about 1.5 to 2 years ago. We had just had our 4th baby and she was 3 months old. So we went through from 3 kids to 9 kids in a matter of about 4 months. What had happened was we had a family member who made some really, really bad choices. And the kids got taken away. And the oldest kid was 16, turning 17, and had participated in some of the behaviors and actions that, with one of the parents, that got the kids taken away. So I had to work through, how I responded to that was disgust and anger. So not taking the kids in, but the actions that got them taken away. Because there was a part of me that was like, no. Like I had this really strong emotional response to the individual doing it. I judged that person. I said, how? How could you ever do that? How? So like I still am having it come up because I'm not fully there. But I was disgusted and I was angry and I just had this intense emotion. So what that would look like if I didn't have that resonance would be, wow, that's hard and that's not okay. And that behavior is wrong. And we don't ever do that. Like it's an observation. So it comes from more of like a neutral, loving place where you see so clearly, you discern that it's not okay, You can implement boundaries, and there's no guilt or shame. You don't feel bad about it. It's just very much like, this is what we have to do. So when you hear something awful and horrendous about someone down the street, you can feel compassion, you can feel sorrow and sadness, but it's not this intense emotion that judges the person for being able to do the action. Is that making sense so far? And is that answering your question?
Can you repeat the last sentence that you just said? Sorry, I was talking to a kid.
It's okay.
It was until you were saying how like there's a judgy place and a strong
like a
reaction.
heart-centered, neutral place where you can see through discernment, okay, this is
and
not okay.
That's not something you need to work on, right?
Yeah.
But if it's like a guttural, like, oh, disgusting,
Yes.
like judging and
yes,
like hating that person almost
yes,
for what they did, then that's something that you yourself need to work on.
yes. But
Okay.
it does not mean that you are that. It does not mean that you do that same thing or that you will do that same thing.
But you need to, like, sorry, go ahead.
No, what's your question?
That you need to just acknowledge that you have the capability of doing something like that and be okay with, accept it and work through it and accept them for who they are also, that they have flaws just like you do.
Yeah.
Right?
Because
okay.
We're all the same.
Okay.
We all have the capacity to do amazing righteous things and be like Christ, and we all have the ability to be the opposite. It's constant choices, constant working through things. So what happens is there's this energy behind when you see someone else and you judge that you will never do that. It's a subconscious thing that goes on, and you put yourself in a way above that person. But your soul knows that you're not above anybody else. And so it's doing all of these things to try and reconcile, and it just makes it messy and intense and emotional. So I'll share my next story. So this happened after we had the kids for 4.5 months. It came to an end, and it was time for them to go on to some different people. It was very traumatic, and it was very intense. Because of what these kids had been through for a long time, especially that last bit, the oldest one was very difficult, and we needed to part ways. So I was still trying to heal from this really intense experience. And about 4 months later, there was a family in our ward where we lived. We don't live there now. We had these friends that we sympathized with. They were going through some things that we had gone through. The husband was gone all the time traveling, and we understood that. And I understood what it was like to be at home with kids alone and not really have support. So we reached out and we tried to offer help. And at some point, when the husband came back in town on one of his, he would often go back, but he came in for a break. He asked my husband to keep an eye out for his family. And of course, my husband, being the type that he is very giving. I like to say he sees everyone in their celestial glory, which can blind him to certain things. So my husband, this family was on his mind, and he reached out to the husband because he didn't want to communicate with the wife too much to be appropriate. And what happened was this man was talking back and forth, conversing with him. And I, looking back at the conversation, was able to go, okay, I can see where these things are little red flags, but my husband wasn't seeing them. And what happened, and I do give a disclaimer here, this might need a trigger warning, because this was for me, this was a huge trigger. The man basically solicited my husband to bare minimum at least fantasize inappropriately about this man's wife together, if that makes sense. And then he sent my husband a half-naked picture of his wife. So once that happened, my husband realized, oh, I know what's going on now, and stopped the communication. And I found out about this days later, actually on Easter. So when I found this out, I had these like visceral reactions. It was intense, and I was angry, and I was disgusted, and I was like, what? Who does that? So that, if you ask yourself, who does that? That is a telltale sign that you have stuff that you need to work through. So I had a mentor. I was having physical reactions to this. I had gotten an intense case of mastitis. It triggered my PTSD from betrayal trauma that had happened prior to. I had all kinds of things going on, and it was really hard. And this was not anything that I would ever do. So this is this part of the law that a lot of people have a hard time with, because this is not where we apply the mirroring. This is where we apply that third question. So let's go back to the first ones. How have I done this in the past? How am I doing this now? Or how could I do this if I was under different circumstances? So the emotions that came up, so my mentor told me, you have the law of projection at work here. I was angry. I was so mad because I thought that she was telling me that I was bad like them, that I could do these things, that I was doing these things. And I was like, there's no way that I would do this. I would never do that. And then she started explaining the law to me. And I was like, oh. So there's that part of me that could do these things that I long ago locked away to make it so that those parts of me could never manifest. So what I had to look at is, what was I mad at the husband for? I was not mad that he had issues. I was not triggered that he had, an addiction to pornography and an addiction to sex. And I wasn't mad at those things. I wasn't triggered by those things. I didn't think that he was evil or bad because I had worked through that. I was mad that he was willing to reach out and spread his stuff. That there was no behaviors, anything that we did not ask for this. We did not, we were blindsided by this. We helped them, but that was it. So I had to look at myself and go inward and find the part of myself that will go to great lengths to make it so that I will not let my stuff affect other people. And so it wasn't a behavior for behavior action, it was the general behavior. Is that making sense? So with the wife, I was mad at her for behaviors afterwards. So I had to tell her what happened. And the reactions that came was, it showed me that this was not the first time, that this happens a lot, and that she doesn't do much to stop it. That was why I was so angry. So that triggered a part of me that I had been in abusive relationships before. I had been in relationships that were not healthy, but I would not let myself be put through that. And so I would leave. I would protect myself. I would protect my kid. And so I didn't understand. I didn't understand how she could stay and ignore or deny. So denial came in afterwards, and she actually started lying about what actually happened and turned it and made it seem like my husband was the one who was doing something wrong or being inappropriate. And so I was angry about that too. So if these things had happened and I was able to look at it neutrally and go, oh, this is a struggle of theirs and it's not okay, and I'm not going to do it, and I'm not going to participate in it, but they must be in a really hard spot to be able to do these things. I was still rejecting the part of me that could do that, and that's why those intense emotions came up again. So again, with that little visual, this resonance in them woke up the resonance in me that I had locked away long ago. Long ago, I had decided that I would never do these things, ever, ever, ever. But I had to face it and say, but I have the capability to do that. So I thought, okay, if I was born and went through different experiences when I was a child, if I didn't have the ability to work, and they had a lot of kids, and she did not have a way to provide for them. And so I put myself in a different situation and said, okay, I could see how I would maybe be afraid and I would stay. And okay, I can see how if I've let that many issues and evils come into my life, that I could, with him, my mind could be in a place where I wasn't caring about who it affected. Is this making sense so far? I want to make sure that I'm explaining it properly so that it's not continuously triggering people.
I'm getting it.
Okay.
It makes sense.
Thank you. What was that last part?
I just said it makes sense to me.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
So are there any questions so far? So I
have a question.
Yes.
This is Shauna.
Hi.
How do you get to a place of love for that person?
That is a great question. I had to learn how to love the part of myself that could do that. So I had a really great, another mentor walk me through this in some sessions. So we found the part of me, these people represented something within me that needed attention and healing. And so we used that template, and I said, okay, this is the behavior, not specifically, but generally. These are the emotions that are coming up, and this is what it's bringing up in me. So then I visualized that part of myself actually being like a person. And in like a session, I was there and I was observing, and I saw this part of me that so in psychology, they'll talk about when you have fractures and parts of you break away when you have traumas or other experiences. So I had some traumas earlier in my life that broke away this part of me. And the trauma, when you fracture, it can even just be someone tells you that something is wrong and bad, and you have all these judgments, and so you're like, I can never be that. And so we found her, and we healed her. We gave her what she needed. If she needed a safe place to be, if she needed love, she needed love and acceptance from me, because I hated her. I hated that I had a part of me that could ever do anything in my mind so vile. And I had to ask myself, can I ever love this part of me? Can I ever forgive this part of me? Can I ever accept her? So that was the stuff that I had to work through. Once I could look at her with love and compassion and understanding and say, oh, I can see how that could happen. She's then balanced. She's not like going crazy. And so, for instance, when you have an angry part of you, the potential for anger, people don't want to bring that in because they think that then they will be an angry person. But if you balance it, it can be like a righteous form of anger, which can be what initiates implementation of boundaries and holding boundaries. And that's what they talk about with Christ in the temple when he turned the tables. He had righteous anger. And so he used the light part of that emotion as a catalyst to do something. But when that anger is in its shadow, it's unruly, you don't know when it's coming, it's not appropriate, it's too much, and it hurts people. So we balance it, and then we bring it back in so that it is that extra energy. So what happens is when you have these fractures, your energy will constantly being depleted. Constantly. All of this bandwidth you have and all of these fractures out, trying to, you're fighting them, and so your resources are just constantly going. What I have personally found is when people experience a lot of exhaustion for the work that I do, what comes up is this fractured shadow work where we bring these parts back, and then they have more resources because you're not fighting against yourself anymore, but you bring them back into balance. Now, if you start to feel anger again and frustration, then you know that that shadow part is maybe splintering off again. So it shows you where your needs are, and so you give that part of you attention and then bring it back in again. Does that make sense? So for Shauna, the answer to your question is, I have to love that part of me first before I can ever think to be able to love that in somebody else. And we don't love the behavior, like we don't love the action. That's totally separate. But it's the part of the person that could get to the point where they could do that in the first place. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Thank you. And you can do both verbal and in chat. Awesome. Thank you. So I want to walk somebody through using this in the positive, but then also for the negative. Do I have any volunteers for either?
I'll do whatever you want me to do.
Okay.
Whatever.
You're awesome. Thank you. So let's do the positive first. Let's start with that. So Valerie, did you answer those questions? Did you list the qualities?
I got through the 5 positives and 5 negatives, but I didn't get to the I would never do ones.
Was that because you couldn't think of anything, or is because you're a little scared of it? No.
It was kind of because I couldn't, I kind of feel like I'm at a place where I can see where I could, where people could do that. It's really sad, and it still doesn't make me angry, like when I hear about people abusing kids or whatever, but there's circumstances, like you were saying, there's different circumstances for everybody, and I haven't really been personally affected by a whole lot, so it doesn't bring up a whole lot of like inner turmoil for me. So I couldn't really think of, I would never do that, because I could see anybody could do something, you know what I mean?
Well, and that's what this law shows us, is that anybody can do anything. When we think that and we don't consciously think this a lot of the time, but if we ever think subconsciously that we are above anything, then that's something that we need to work through. So did you start to see like a pattern? Okay, so let me actually say this. The question that I gave you was the 5 qualities. Another question that I would have had you guys do was think of 3 to 5 people that you really, really like, and then list the qualities that you really like about them. You're going to see crossover. Does that make sense? So there's going to be common reasons why you like them. Those common reasons are absolutely qualities that you have, or qualities that you have the ability to really develop and become strong in. So this is the beautiful part of this lesson, or this law, that people forget. And I actually use this in my work as a life mission specialist, where we look and see all of the things that you love. So will you share some of the qualities that you listed that you just really love? So these are the ones that you have a strong positive response to.
You're asking me, right, Valerie?
Yeah, Valerie.
Okay. Dedication, tact, open-mindedness, intelligence, and friendliness.
Okay. So is it safe to say that these qualities are very important for you as a person?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Yeah. So you'll see that what you admire in somebody else are things that you make a priority, or you have the ability to do or be. Are there any qualities that come to your mind that are positive that you see in somebody else and you admire it, but you think that you don't have it?
I don't know. I guess like spontaneity.
Okay.
I have a hard time doing that sort of thing.
So with that, and we use this law, I would say that you have the ability to be really spontaneous. You would just have to find that part of you and nurture it. So if I was in a session with you, I would go back to, why did this part of you get shut down? Were you ever spontaneous and it didn't go well? So we would work with that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because if you really, really admire this quality in another person, you have that. So back to this thing again. Strong emotional response to a good quality is waking up that in you. So it's either been shut down or it's a perceived weakness, and it's been designed that way so that you can develop it and make it really strong.
How do we find the balance though? That's my, because I'm all on or all off. I can either have a clean house and be happy with my house, or I can be totally off with my house and be off having fun with my kids and then feel the guilt about my house. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you balance, like, yes, I need to work on being more spontaneous and being more fun for my kids and my family, but I also need to make sure that my house isn't a total wreck, which it is most of the time right now anyways.
So with that specific one, we would work around the judgments of a clean house versus a messy house. And we would work, so the balance would come in listening to your intuition. And that's where boundaries come in, boundaries with others and boundaries with yourself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think more of what I'm wondering though, it's not just with my clean house. It's like,
right.
Like having dinner every night and food in the house and like just general, because I'm okay with my house not being clean now, but I need to make sure that their needs are met at home, but I also want to be able to have fun. But so okay. I feel like I can't work on being spontaneous while also having order in my house. Does that make mm-hmm. sense?
It does. So we work around spontaneous. What does it mean? When is it okay? When is it not okay? There was something else that you said and I picked up on it. Okay, something about spontaneous and it being irresponsible. Does that resonate?
Yep.
Yeah. So then we would go and we would work with that.
Okay.
So we bring that part into balance so that you can be spontaneous and responsible.
So you look at the you have the you see it as a positive quality, but you look at maybe the negative side of it too, and where judgment might come in, and work on being okay with that.
Yeah.
That it's not necessarily irresponsible.
Right. Right. So with the positive qualities that we admire, we either accept them or we reject them as well. So this brings me to another part of this law. So when we look at somebody and we see a good quality, like just say me in the chat or like say it out loud if you've ever been judged for a good quality. Maybe you exercise. Maybe you eat really healthy and clean. Maybe you were I'm hearing goody in my mind. How many of us have been judged for a good quality? So what happens is the person who's judging you guys both wake up and resonate together an energy or vibration that is the same. But what happens when someone judges you for that good quality, they're rejecting that part of themselves. They are, what was the word? It just lost my mind, or escaped my mind. So it's like reject, but you deny it. So for instance, that person probably has a desire to exercise, eat healthy, but they're denying that in them. So for instance, there was this person that I looked at, they ate well, exercised all the time, like never missed a day, even if they were sick. And I had all of these judgments around my perception on maybe this being out of balance for the person. And it wasn't mine to judge that. And I was, in a way, like, oh, why do they do that? And it's embarrassing to admit, but at the same time, it's a reality. We all do it to some degree in a wide variety of different things. So that's why fit shaming is a thing. That's why healthy eating shaming is a thing. That's why being good shaming is a thing, is because there's parts of these people who see this thing in somebody else that's waking something up in them. It's vibrating and resonating the same, but they're denying it for themselves. Is that aspect making sense?
Yes.
Thank you.
It does.
So then we can look at that again and say, oh, this isn't about me. This is the law of projection at work for that person. And then we can have love and compassion for them too. So what this law does, and it's a potent law, potent law. So if we are here in order to learn and grow and cleanse ourselves of things that are not good. So when I say that, we're still not trying to destroy the parts of us that could be bad. We are cleansing and bringing together. We are becoming whole with ourselves. So in order to have pure and unconditional love for any being that could come to an earth and do the evils that are in this world. So I think about Heavenly Father. He has had to process through all of these types of things in order to get to the point where he can love 100% unconditionally every person who has ever lived on this earth. Ever. So if we have resonances within us that reject certain things, he's going to allow these certain people to come into our spaces. So back to my story with the people in my ward, I was angry that this came to me. So the law of attraction is kind of a partner of this one. They're connected. It's when you have a resonance within you that vibrates with a resonance in somebody else, an aspect of the law of attraction will allow this person to come into your space in order to work through these resonances and heal and love and accept that resonance within you and become whole. Does that make sense? So I got to that understanding after that experience happened, and I kept asking, why? Why us? We had just gone through this really hard thing with having those 5 extra kids, and we thought we were going to heal, and we thought we were going to move on, and then boom, this thing happened. And I heard so clearly in my mind, because I knew you wouldn't keep quiet. So I had this wave of information hit me from gratitude to understanding, and had that experience happened to somebody else in that area, they might not have been having the same conversations I was having. They may have been filing a divorce. They may have had like all these terrible things happen. Thankfully, it happened to my husband and I, who were strong enough to not participate, to not just completely crumble. I mean, it was extremely challenging, and we had a lot of stuff. I had to work through my anger and frustration that my husband was not able to see the red flags, and that he was not seeing boundaries that needed to be in place, or seeing boundaries that should have been in place before. So that was the law of projection at work with me and my husband, because I would not allow myself, I was so restrictive. I would not allow myself to behave in that way, because my boundaries were so rigid and so like big. But that was a part of myself that I had to go inward and say, okay, there's part of me that thinks that I have to have boundaries like the Great Wall of China in order to protect me. So I had to show her attention, and I had to show her love and compassion. I shut down a part of myself that could be flexible, that could be trusting, that could allow my boundaries to be adjusted, if that's making sense. Yeah, Shauna, she just said boundaries are a big trigger, and rightfully so. And so I had to work through my judgments towards my husband and his lack of boundaries. But it was a learning experience for him, and man, he learned boundaries in a very big way in the last couple of years. Very, very big ways. Not just this experience, but other experiences too. Boundaries were his lesson. And so I had to be compassionate and patient with him healing those parts of himself too. So is it all making sense so far before I move on? And are there any other questions so far?
It makes sense to me.
Okay, thank you. So we talked briefly about the positives and how we can identify good qualities that we have. We are either in them and we're accepting them, or we're rejecting them. And when we reject the positive qualities, that's when we can get into envy and jealousy. It's because we're not acknowledging the good quality that we have. So with the negative ones, is anyone willing to be a volunteer for the negative qualities? And if not, that's fine.
I'm willing, but I don't want to steal the spotlight again, so
It's okay.
call on me if you want me.
Thank you. So I'm just going to tune into the energy really quick and see where we need to go next. Valerie, will you share your 5 qualities? And I appreciate you being willing to participate and volunteer.
No problem. My 5 negatives were dirty, and these are not necessarily like my top ones. They just came to mind. So
Perfect.
Dirty, selfish, obnoxious, inappropriate, and thoughtless.
Can you say those again, but just a little slower?
Sorry. Dirty, selfish, obnoxious, inappropriate, thoughtless.
Okay, thank you. I know it's a very vulnerable feeling to share the negative ones, so I really do appreciate you being willing to do that. So if we were to ask those questions, how do I do it now? How have I done it in the past? And how, if under different circumstances, could I do it? So the third question basically is, I do not do this thing, and I won't do this thing, kind of understanding of this law. Do any of those things fall under the first question for you?
The first question being, I would never do those, or sorry, I
So
don't.
you know what? Let's do this. Out of these ones, which one triggers you the most, or which one has an experience associated with it, with a person that, and it bothers you?
Probably thoughtless.
Okay. Are you willing to share the experience?
Sure. The one that comes to mind right now is, I've already talked to you about it, I'm pretty sure. I was the head of an organization, and people would just not show up and do what they had committed to do. And it seemed to me that they just were not, they had to have just not been thinking about what it would do to the other people that were there to do what needed to be done.
Right.
And that really bothered me. How could you not think, you know?
So there's a little bit of selfishness that actually plays into this.
Definitely.
People not showing up, people not being responsible, and it having an effect on other people, so that falls under the selfish. Which the not responsible actually is connected to when you mentioned spontaneity. So there's a connection there. So what we would do is, with this last question, not only do we ask, how could I do this if I was under different circumstances? So we would, where does your mind take you when we ask that question? Like, what kind of life experience do you think a person would be in to where they could be thoughtless like that and just not show up for their responsibilities?
I just think of what their parents didn't teach them when they were growing up and what mine did. And a lot of people are not teaching their kids now. And that bothers me on behalf of my kids too. That, you know, I fear for what they're going to have to deal with when they grow up, because it's bad now when it's going to be even worse then, you know?
So when we look at the law of projection and shadow work, we would find the part of you that has the ability to be thoughtless. And that part of you, she's most likely locked away. She's most likely rejected, and you don't want to bring her back in. And it probably creates a strong, and I do heart, like a lot of people, when they have these reactions, they're right in here. It's like this churning in the stomach, and it's usually connected to your third chakra. So it's this like this visceral reaction. Some people, when they come across qualities and attributes in people that they just can't stomach, they'll feel like they need to throw up. So we would find this part of you that you're rejecting away, and you're having that strong emotional response to it. Are you willing to let me to take you through a visual?
Sure.
Okay, awesome. So take a big deep breath. And I want you So this space is completely safe. I've already created a space like visually, energetically that you can go into, and you're always protected. So whatever visuals come up, it's always safe. Can you imagine or see? So we asked this part of you to kind of present herself to you subconsciously. Can you see what that part of you would look like? The part of you that has the capability to be thoughtless.
I guess it's the part of me that would be spontaneous and not thinking about stuff. Is that what you're looking for?
Not exactly.
I'm trying
So
to
take a really deep breath and tune into the energy of this action. So this is not what manifests currently, because you go out of your way to make it so that you're not thoughtless. That's typically what happens.
unaware. I think of somebody who just like unaware and like she doesn't have the information that she needs.
So do you see her in your mind's eye? Does she look like something? Like, what does she look like? What is her attitude and behaviors?
Just kind of like I see it like a type 1 kind of person, bright eyes, and which just happens to be my secondary.
The word ditzy came
Happy.
to my mind when you were tuning
Ditzy?
into her.
Ditzy? Yeah, that fits. That's a good description.
Is that a word that triggers you? Like if you were to be called ditzy, that would really hurt your feelings?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So take a big breath. So this is really interesting because the part of you that you locked away that could be thoughtless, when she's balanced, she's spontaneous. Do you see how you lock away the good along with the bad?
Yes.
So this girl, what does she need? So I want you to ask in your mind, this part of you, what do I need? What do I need to feel safe and balanced and healed?
I feel like I need to not be judged.
Mm-hmm. So can we give
free.
her, go ahead.
There's just to be able to be free to do what I want without feeling like I'm, I guess, ditzy and irresponsible and all those things that we talked about.
Right.
It's making me cry. Sorry.
It's okay.
I'm not sorry. It's okay.
Thank you. I feel it. I'm picking up on it. I'll cry with you. So can we give her this space, like create a room? Actually, it feels like she would want this open space to just be free and frolic and have fun and like go on a vacation and not have any responsibilities to come back. Does that feel right?
Yeah.
What does that look like for you? What would the dream of that be?
I just keep picturing like a big empty white room, almost like a hospital operating room, but with nothing in it. Mm-hmm. It's clean and white, and I don't have to be anywhere, and I don't have to do anything. It's already clean, so I can just be, and there's music, and nobody's watching me.
So that's what we're going to start with. What would be fun for her? Let these thoughts, these daydreams pop up and then come to fruition in that space.
I don't even know. I've been in mother mode for so long now that I don't even know what I would do. And I think I'll give you a little background. I guess when I was in high school, I think I lived more in my type 1. I was fun and spontaneous and carefree. And then I grew up, quote unquote, and I'm like all 4. Mm-hmm. And I have a hard time finding things that are fun for me. Like my husband says, you need to go out and do something fun for you. And I'm like, well, what would I do? I don't do anything fun. Like I don't have that anymore.
So that part of you literally at some point got locked away. So can we bring her back to the age that she was when she was still free and connect her to that?
So you want like an age, probably?
You can say it or you can just think it, because we're just going to energetically connect her to that. That hopefully just connects her to that part of herself so that she can wake it up again.
But I wasn't, see, there comes the judging again. I wasn't in a good place with my relationships and with my actions at that time, to where I guess that's why I locked it away. I don't want to be like that.
Right. So let's
this is
put
better,
her in space and let her just be completely without judgment. And let's energetically give her whatever it is that she needs to heal. So we're going to have like people in this space, if they do happen to come in, they're going to be like, this is great. You're awesome. You're perfect just the way that you are. And maybe even bring the Savior in and he can say, you're perfect the way that you are. This is okay. Who you are is okay. And you bring a gift. You bring a gift to Valerie when you are healthy and balanced. Because every part of ourselves that we lock away brings with it a gift. So we feed her and we nourish her. So this part of you that could be thoughtless, are you still having that reaction when you think about bringing her back in? Is it thoughts of, but I can't bring you back in because then you can hurt relationships and you can hurt my kids and you can, be really irresponsible with these things that are important?
Yes, but to a lesser degree.
Perfect. We're getting there. Is she able to connect to what could be fun yet?
Yes, I think so. I did it the other day. I think this is timely. I feel like we just had our 5th kid, and my husband is kind of shutting down his fun side because he's just overworked and
right.
babies and all that hard stuff. But I feel like my kids are struggling because now his fun is gone and my fun's been gone for a long time.
Right.
And the other day I did something fun and they really, like, it lit them up. I could tell they really needed it, But then I also felt a little bit judged by my husband and by myself. But I think
that part of you. So what happened was she started to come out, but then she started to get judged again, and it was locked up. Mm-hmm. Like, not going to do that again.
Yeah.
Hurt. So, but it's because it still came with this fear of her being unbalanced and not knowing what to expect. So when we know that when she's completely fed and nourished, she's totally stable. And what that means, this part that you is potentially thoughtless, but also can be spontaneous. She brings joy with her. Free, fun, without like attachments or expectations. So when she knows that she has this gift, and you know that she has this gift, is she willing to receive this now? Like all of this nourishing energy?
Yes.
So I want you to take a really big, deep breath in. And just let all of that come in. Does she look different now? Does she act different?
Yeah, a little bit more grounded.
Yeah. Is she able to observe where the responsibilities are now?
Yeah, I think so.
So when she's balanced, she can be fun and spontaneous and all these things, but she's not oblivious. So she can have an eye that will go, oh, okay. And that's where another part of you can come in and be responsible. It's when we have these shadow parts that, so we either lock them away, or when we're actually in the behavior, we become puppets to them. They get really big and loud and in our face, and then we start behaving in a way that's like, whoa, where did that come from? So we feed it and we nourish it and give it what it needs, and it balances out. So with where she's at right now, how you see her and feel her, can you look at her with love and acceptance?
Yeah.
Can you,
I want to be her.
mm-hmm. Can you bring her back in knowing that she's balanced? And if anything starts to happen where it even feels like thoughtlessness, that's a sign that goes, oh, there's a need here. You give her the attention that she needs, and you're good. But we don't want to ever get it to the point where she starts to get away again and you lock her away. Is this all making sense to everyone?
Makes sense to me, but I'm the subject, so.
If there's questions, just post them. So take another big, deep breath. And I want you to imagine bringing her in somehow. So that can look like hugging her. But I want you to have a moment at least where you love and accept her. You know, you can do the ho'oponopono, where you, I love you, I'm sorry, please forgive me, thank you, like that whole thing. So with this thing that we're working with, thoughtlessness in other people will always be a trigger as long as you don't accept the potential within you. So healing her, bringing her back in, the thoughtlessness or perceived thoughtlessness of other people the triggers will go away. They dramatically minimize.
Okay.
Were you able to bring her back in?
Yeah.
Big breath. So when you bring her back in, she brings with her the gift of fun and being able to be spontaneous without hurting anyone. Awesome. So is anyone else wanting to talk about maybe a quality or characteristic that they struggle with? If not, that's fine. Are there any other questions so far? Okay. So just to recap, with this law, sometimes it is something that you are doing right now and you just don't see it. So I'm going to share a story about that. 2 stories, actually. So I used to be really, really triggered by people who lied until I had to face it. Lying itself, I still believe is not okay. I can still hold healthy boundaries with people who lie to me, but it's not that intense emotion anymore. So when I was learning this law, I was like, oh, you don't lie. Like, you don't, like, that'll break our relationship. Like, we were having really big relationship struggles with some people in extended family and being lied to and lied about. So I had to get really real with myself. And I totally used to lie when I was younger. Like, totally used to lie. So that was the first question. How had I lied in the past? And I lied because I was afraid. I was scared. I was afraid of the consequences. I was scared of what would happen to me. I was scared of what I would think of myself if I got caught for these things that I did, even though, I mean, to an adult brain, you're like, but you lied, so that wasn't good either. But I had to work through it. So then the second question applied too. I thought that I was an honest person, and I had to get really real with myself. And I was like, oh, I have told little fibs, like saying that it was really bad traffic when I actually was just late. I left the house late. I was late. I had done it a few times when I first started taking sessions years ago. I'm a little embarrassed to say this, but it's totally okay because we're all human. I had a client call me for a session, and it was so funny. I wasn't going to share this with you guys, but it just came up. But it didn't show up on my scheduler, and I didn't get a notice for it. And she had the same name as a family member. Oh my gosh, and I hope that she doesn't watch this. And if she does, I hope she forgives me. But I answered it, and I was like, hi. And it had the same name as my mother-in-law. And I was like, oh no, like she's like, are you okay? Are we like still good? And I didn't have the heart to tell her that I didn't know about her session because I didn't want her to feel bad or feel like she was an inconvenience or anything. So I fibbed for perceivable an okay reason, right? I didn't want to hurt her feelings, but I still lied. I was like, oh, I thought it was my mother-in-law, but you're my client instead. Like, it was a total lie. Total lie. I had good intentions for it, right, though? I didn't want to hurt her feelings. I didn't want the rest of the session for her to be thinking about if it was an inconvenience for me. But I had to face that I still lied about it. So then I had to go in and say, okay, I'm doing these things. I am hating the part of myself that has lied, that can continue to lie, and that can totally lie in terrible ways. I had to face the part of me that had the potential to do like big lies, not just like little white lies that could maybe hurt somebody's feeling if I was, whatever. So thank you. Valerie just commented that she appreciated that. Thank you. And being honest with these things, I've had to work through fears of being judged. But I'm choosing to be more authentic. And so thank you for giving me that safe space to do that. But I had to face it. I was lying. So there are some other things that you can do if the situation arises. Like, it's very rare that I have the person face the thing and say, like, I would say, I'm a liar, I'm a liar, I'm a liar, until I woke up this emotional trigger and I was able to break through it. So once you're able to face it, like I had to face, I lied, I was a liar to some degree. Like, my whole existence wasn't a liar, but I had that resonance in me that I was like, oh no, I don't do that. But I was also at this point saying, oh, I don't do that kind of lying, but I do this kind of lying and it's okay. So that was what I had to work through. Once I did that and I loved and accepted and forgave the part of myself for the lying, that's when the triggers with other people started to dramatically diminish. I was able to look at other people who were lying and go, oh, they're scared. And I had another situation come up, and it was with family. And I had thankfully worked through this. But these family members, we caught them in some lies, and we flat out confronted them, and there were still lies. And I was like, oh, they're scared. I get that they're scared, and I get that they thought that this was the way out of it. They weren't ready to face the reality of it, and that's okay. I can still have my discernment, which says, this is not okay. This is not a behavior that I'm okay with. I can still implement healthy boundaries with these people that are not being truthful with me. So how far away do I want them? How close do I want them? Do I want my boundary to be a brick wall? Do I want it to be mesh and somewhat permeable? Those are all things that I had to go through too. And this law does not negate any of those. What it does is makes them clear. My discernment was clear and my boundaries were clear. So had I been in this emotional response place, I would have implemented those boundaries from a place of hurt and ego. And I would have been like, you lied at me, you lied to me, and how dare you do that? And I'm never speaking to you again. And boom, like my boundary would have been way away from me and a big wall. But what happened instead was it was clear, it was neutral. I observed and I accepted where they were at with love and said, excuse me, I see what happened. It's not okay. And here's my boundary. And when you're ready to behave differently with me, we can talk about this boundary. And this boundary can adjust. But for now, it's here. And it was just neutral. It was with love. It was not neutral towards the behavior, but in here was neutral. So those are actually the stories that I'll share with you. There was another one, but I don't feel like it needs to be shared because it was really close to the lying one. So there's a question. What if the boundary issue is with the spouse? That is really tricky. And I've had that where I had very different boundaries with my spouse when it came to certain things and certain people. It took a lot of patience, but so what I did was I needed to find the part of me that was surfacing. Was it the part of me that it's not necessarily the boundary part of you, but it might be the controller or the person who needs to like overly protect. So for instance, the energy that I'm kind of feeling is this shadow part that needs to protect. And when that gets a little out of balance, it's more this offensive energy instead of holding something, if that's making sense. I hope that I'm answering your question. If you can share any more information, that would be awesome. And if you can't, that's fine too. But I'm hoping that I'm answering your question.
Right. Are you talking to me? You're talking to me, right? Okay.
Yes, I was trying to respect privacy.
Yeah. So you're talking to Shauna?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, your voice sounds different when I'm talking to you this way. Well, as you were working with Valerie, I think what came up for me, sorry, I didn't want to do it because I don't want to cry, okay. But I kind of saw that I have very strong boundaries and that I don't know, I think it's to protect the little girl in me who had to set them up very young.
Right.
And I hadn't really thought about it from that angle before. So when someone else does not have boundaries, right, and that causes hurt for me or for other people, I just can't even understand it, you know? Right. My boundaries are so strong that I've had issues with hugging people even.
Right. And
because I had to turn that off in me when I was very young, hugging, tickling, touching.
Right.
And it did protect me in ways that other people were not. But
so when this is coming up, and thank you so much for sharing that. When this comes up, we look at the part, it just escaped me again. So, and that's okay because it just might not be ready to be worked with. But I'll try to give insights and suggestions. So I'm going to mute you again really quick. So if you want to say something again, just go ahead and unmute. Okay, so there's some interference. Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you so much for sharing those things. So when we do shadow work, we look at the part. So what the part that would be rejected is the part that is perceived as not having boundaries, but it would be looked at as something else. We would find that part that so it would be the part of you that could trust. That feels really close to it. The part of you that could trust. Sorry, I'm empathic, so I'm picking up on that. So we lock away the part that could let those boundaries be crossed. And so when we shut down and reject that, when we see other people that could be trusting or that could not be observant to these red flags or these things, these safeguards, like, oh man, I was mad at my husband for being in a place where that man could do what he did. I was so mad at him for not seeing the red flags, because I looked back, we went back to the conversation because it was all via text. And it was, this was said, this was said, this was said. And I was like, as a third person outside, I was not in his mind. I was not in his helper mode. I was not in his, I want to save people mode. I was not in his compassionate understanding. I always see people's goodness mode. I was the girl who learned you have to put boundaries up because those are the only things that save you. Those are the only things that keep you safe. And so I had to find that part of me that could, right. And so with the other person so you have to look at it bit by bit. So I had to work through the stuff that was coming up with my husband, the stuff that came up with the man, and the stuff that came up with the woman that participated in that exchange with us. And I had to say, like, I had to bring that part of me back in that could trust, that could believe people had good intentions, that could believe like any of that stuff. So I had struggled for a very long time with trust and boundaries, and I was overly boundaried because there was that imbalance. Is this answering your question? Yes. Okay. Thank you. So I actually have us scheduled until 1:30 my time, and Zoom will kick us out in about 10 minutes. So if you guys have any more questions, I would love to answer them if I can. I do offer private sessions for this where we create a really safe space to go into these parts that are just sometimes really scary, but we work with them and we heal them. I would love for any of you guys who had some insights on this, if you are willing to share the insights, either like privately or in a post. If you choose to do a post, I just ask that you do hashtag awaken your divine. But I would like to, actually, the 2 people who commented, I have a special gift for you guys. I thank you so much for doing that. I will message you after this. And I will also, with this replay, I will put in a link to where you guys can schedule privately if you have things that you need more support with, so that you can do that privately. So there aren't any questions so far. So I'm just going to give it a couple more minutes if you guys have any. But reach out to me if you have questions that you need further clarification on. And I appreciate you guys for being here. And I hope that this has cleared up a lot of misconceptions. So this law does not, let me read your question, Liz. Thank you. I hope that this has cleared up a lot of misconceptions with this law. This law is not straight across the board, what you don't like is a mirror. That's not what this law is. And my heart hurts when this law is used inappropriately and it's used as a weapon. It's when we look at something neutral and we look at the behavior as being not okay versus the person doing it being bad or wrong. When we can look at it neutrally, just with discernment, that's when we're in a good space. When there's a strong negative or positive reaction to something, that's where we look at it. You're most welcome. I'm glad that I could clarify that for you. So 2 books I highly recommend if you feel pulled to learn more about these. The Dark Side of the Light Chasers by Debbie Ford. Amazing book. This law is so deep that even this webinar does not do it justice. And I might actually continue to do these because I'm realizing it's a big issue with a lot of people misunderstanding it and it causing a lot of grief. So the second book, amazing too, is The Shadow Effect, and that is by 3 authors, Deepak Chopra, Marianne Williamson, and Debbie Ford. So if you guys have any questions, please reach out to me. My website is hollybuehler.com, HOLLYBUHLER, or awakenyourdivine.com. And you guys can find me on there, and you can email me or private message me. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope you guys all have an amazing day. Don't hesitate to reach out. Okay, you guys all have an awesome day, and we'll see you in the group. Bye.